A lot of the listeners that we have, they have either started with content production, or they do want to start with content production.
Mm-hmm.
So the trend that they and we are seeing is that it needs to be less polished. It needs to be more, and I've heard people say that they don't like the word authentic,
Mm-hmm.
but it needs to be more genuine, tell some stories, and it needs to be some frequency. So what are your kind of like advice in terms of content strategy and frequency?
Mm-hmm.
If let's say you're working with a technology company then, so how would they position their content?
Mm-hmm.
And every case is different, but in general.
I think that's where you're going to want to start thinking about the brand of that company. Let's say we're talking technology, right?
Yeah.
And let's say the client is Apple. If you're going to produce content for Apple, video content, maybe written content on the site or in emails, etc., you know that Apple builds really beautiful products. Their product design is, it's legendary, right? And because you know that that's part of the brand and that people who have experienced Apple products are used to that quality, any sort of content that's produced that sort of bears the Apple name, it should match that. So I think if Apple put out something that was a little bit more DIY and they shot it with, I don't know, maybe like an iPhone, I guess they would shoot it with, right? And it didn't have like the same polish as some of, let's say, the commercials that they put out, like that Spike Jonze commercial. I think that was Apple with FKA Twigs sort of dancing
Mm-hmm.
around, right? Super polished. That the amount of effort that probably went into that, I can't even think about that right now. But let's say Apple put together, just a clips of people dancing around, and they shot it with like an iPhone or some sort of small camera, and then at the end you saw the Apple logo. You'd probably think, oh, okay, it's Apple, but you'd feel uneasy, right? You wouldn't feel like, okay, that didn't seem right.
That makes sense.
Right? So I think in terms of authenticity, you want to think about what your brand is. And I agree, it doesn't always have to be polished. You don't need to, you don't need to be an auteur to like make video content. I think the important thing is sort of, if your content is a reflection of who your organization is, who your brand is, and then you put out interesting content and then you put it out frequently, I think you'll find an audience for it. I think, YouTube is such a great example of this. There's so many folks on YouTube, and I remember watching some of them, and they would really start off and the videos would be really quite rough. You could tell they were just shooting using their front-facing camera, and then they sort of evolved, and the videos got slicker and slicker. But even videos that got slicker, they still sort of remain true to whoever the YouTuber is, right? That sort of the style, the thinking, that sort of DNA of the YouTuber, it's present in the style of the videos that they're doing, even if it's let's say not as raw as it was when they first started.
Yeah,
it's okay for there to be an evolution in your style. It just still has to make sense to who you are. And when you put out content, I mean, frequency is certainly important, but also important is the content should be interesting.
Yeah,
should be interesting and relevant to your audiences, because you can put out uninteresting content as frequently as possible.
Nobody cares.
Nobody's going to care.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like you need to think about all these things. You need to consider your audience. What are they really interested in? How can you be of value to them? What sort of content would be of value to them? Think about the media that you're using to push out your content. That'll help you determine your frequency. Is it something that you're publishing somewhere? Is it on YouTube? Are you pushing it out on social where you might have to publish more frequently? All these things you should take into consideration.
But that's the difficult part, because just launching an idea and saying we want great stuff to happen, that's a common sentence I hear from talking to.
Or they want to go viral.
Yeah, they want to go viral, or we want everyone to see this, or but they are talking from an inside and out perspective, not from an outside in perspective, most of the time.